Welcome to the Machines and Molecules podcast. Machines and Molecules hosts guests that have backgrounds in biotechnology, biochemistry, and machine learning. And our guest today is Mark DePristo. Mark is best known as the co-founder of BigHat Biosciences and its first CEO, but he was also in Big Pharma before. I'm really pleased to have you. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here, Igmar.
How have you been this week? You said before we started recording, you said it's been really busy.
It has. You know, we're setting up the new venture studio that's going along really quickly. We've shifted from talking about it to actually building and executing in it. So that's another level of busy. And I've fallen down a little bit the AI programming rabbit hole this week. So I can be twice as productive with my little agents.
Would you have done that while you were still CEO of BigHat? Would you
No,
have gone,
the last piece of code I wrote there was the Markov chain Monte Carlo curve fitting code for dilution series, and it was such a pleasure. I love coding. I mean, at some fundamental level, it's just so fun to teach the computer how to do things.
Yeah, definitely. I constantly have to remind myself, you have to do other things as CEO rather than coding. But we are a bit smaller than BigHat was in the end.
Yeah, by the end, it was hard to justify. Today, though, with the little venture studio, I can reach out and build stuff.
How many people are there at the studio right now?
There's myself and my co-founder, Pierre. And then outside of that core 2 team, we have 3 more people who are spending a day a week with us. And this is great. So about 5 people in and out. We have a couple of project meetings coming up after this podcast. So it's got real cadence and momentum on the infrastructure development, our first biopharma partnership, and the first company we're building.
Interesting. But maybe let's go the historic route and let's talk a bit about BigHat, your first company that you built. You came from Alphabet, and I think you got to know your BigHat co-founder at Alphabet, Peyton. And so you've had the thesis when you started building BigHat that you need to embed machine learning early in the research pipeline rather than tuck it on later, as is done often when you have processes in pharma, for example, that are so well worn. People just say, let's do this better with machine learning. So how does integrating machine learning from the get-go, how did that hold up in reality?
That's a great question. So, just to sort of orient everyone before we begin, BigHat is a AI first antibody design company that Peyton Greenside and I founded in 2019 here in Silicon Valley. It's about a 100-person company in San Mateo now, which is about 30 miles from where I am in Los Altos. Going strong. It's actually becoming a clinical stage biotech this year. We have our first therapeutics going into people imminently. So it's an incredibly exciting moment to see. It's funny to think back from that context that we've designed AI antibodies to think about why did we even start the thing in the first place? What was the frustration and what was the challenge we wanted to tackle? And ultimately, it goes back to this issue we were having at Google, which is where Peyton and I met. It was clear in 2015, 2016, 2017, when we were there building things in Google's AI division, that this was a big deal. Like, this was really a pretty amazing technology. And all the problems we were tackling, it was really moving the needle. We did a whole bunch of stuff in human genome sequencing, ultimately embedded in a tool called Deep Variant, which is a flagship tool still from Google. But we did some early experimental work, or early, I guess not experimental, but prototyping work on the computer using AI to predict protein properties. And what was really clear from that work in 2018, really, that we desperately wanted lab validation. Like, you consume everyone's data, you build models, and at some point, kind of like Maggie Thatcher's famous thing that you eventually run out of other people's money, like eventually you run out of other people's data, and you really want your predictions validated. And it turns out that by coupling, if you lean into, like, my job ultimately is making predictions and validating them and feeding that information back into the models, this leads you basically to the design of BigHat, which is, yes, there's going to be a large scale upfront effort of collecting public data, training models, getting as good as you can on other people's data, but really setting up a very high speed loop so that when you're at the frontier, when you have predictions you think might be truly good molecules, that you go make them and test them at scale. And so the first versions of BigHat really had that loop embedded from day one. It's just that it was low scale and slow. Today, the loop is incredibly high throughput. You know, we can purify this is as of last year, hundreds, I think actually thousands. I think the last was 2,000 antibody designs every week. Designed, synthesized, purified, and measured, fed back into the models. So that means there's millions of data points inside of BigHat these days. That loop is the key. The key thing is bouncing from predictions to validation and back into better models. And it's been great.
In order to get there, though, you have to probably lock in onto certain design routes so that you can increase the speed, right? Because you can't like fiddle around and say, maybe we change the construct completely and do something adventurous.
Programs in multiple antibody formats. You know, a VHH nanobody and an SCFE. Just because maybe you want to pick your design constructs later.
Yeah.
So we actually ended up exploring pretty broadly. You know, the issue was less needing to constrain yourself early because of technical issues. It was more that there was typically a coupling to the format of the antibody and its likely use in people. So sometimes you needed a nanobody because you wanted to have a short lifespan, or you wanted it to get into nooks and crannies that like a full monoclonal antibody probably couldn't. And so you would start with a nanobody, but in many cases you would go in the reverse, saying, look, ultimately we know we need a long half-life. We know it needs an FC. We're going to have a very large molecule. Let's go and make a standard monoclonal backbone. And then you might add, other things to make it multi-specific. But you need flexibility because to go broadly, you need to support a lot of formats.
For sure, but you probably have to lock in, okay, I am able to go high speed in nanobodies. And then I'm going to add on top of that, on the experimentation, like in the wet lab, I'm going to add on top of that standard monoclonal antibody backbones. And then I'm going to add on top of that, I don't know, the third thing. That's probably how you build it up, I suppose.
Yeah, you know, you got the way we started is we started with one type. We started with nanobodies that worked. And we could measure binding with ELISA assays. So the very first loop was like nanobodies only, ELISA binding assays.
Yeah.
And then we added more and more assays on both sides, right? More formats on the left and more kind of assays on the right. And by as of now, BigHat is measuring kind of all the big things. You know, you get binding, stability, solubility, yield, purity, everything you could want, really, we're trying to measure. And the platform was designed to scale in that way, that it was easy to add new formats and it was easy to add new assays. And that turns out to be critically important.
I think you've previously, in some other events, talked about rather having fast iteration cycles with data that's generated for the purpose. And now you're talking about, well, maybe sometimes massive data sets can make sense when the data quality is high. Do I understand you correctly?
It's interesting. This is ultimately about how to train machine learning models well, right? Like that's fundamentally the question. But what you really want is high value or high information content data.
Yeah, definitely.
Go way back into problems that are trivially easy to solve now, but we're actually cutting edge research in 2016. if you want to train a cat-dog classifier, this is table stakes. Of course you do that. So then you train your model on that data and you get what you get, right? So the question is, what kind of data do you get to make the next generation of the model better? So you could go and say, look, this is great. Like 10 million pictures is going to make it way better. And that's generally true. So like if you can collect 10 million pictures of dogs and cats, obviously we'll do this. And this is sort of where the scaling laws come in today, right, for LLMs. You're like, if I get 10 times more data, I get better for free. So of course I'll do that. Is that most of the new data you're adding is probably not so useful. It's recapitulating data that you already have. Like it basically told you a lot about how to classify a bunch of cat-like objects that you already did great on. Most of the data covers the standard cat configuration, right? Like it's standing, it's doing this, it's on a normal background. The issue is that if you really want to get better and stop making your errors, it's in the margin. And it's that type of data, that decision data, that you really want to be able to generate ground truth for. Yeah. So the data you really want is, yes, you could collect a lot of dog and cat data, but what you really want is, like, this is a really hard classification. Like, I want lots of examples of that because then I can really move the needle on what my model is doing. And that has to do a lot with trying to make the things that the model is confident about being good, but turn out not to be good. This is like, I'm stabilizing my protein. You told me it was going to be stabilizing by adding this mutation, and it's not. Like, that is the data you want to make your models better. Adding yet more stabilizing evidence for the mutations that already stabilize things is, okay, not so helpful.
It's a bit useless, yes, definitely. But what the point you're making is a bit more subtle than something that I've explained to biochemists over and over, which is that, well, it depends on your data quality in the sense of, if you have very noisy data, for example, because you didn't purify a protein, and that was back when we worked with people that were engineering enzymes, for example.
Yes.
When you don't purify your protein, you're going to need much more data. Whereas if you do purify, you have high quality assays, then you can do with much less. So that's another trade-off, just the noise.
So we express and purify every version of our antibodies to very high standard, because it's hard to understand like an aggregation assay if it's only 90% your protein and it's 10% E. coli gunk, right? Like that makes your assay very hard. So we tended to be obsessive about the quality of the data. It's worth more low quality points. And that turned out to be super important. I mean, to the point that we were obsessive at BigHat about things that people typically did not think too hard about, to a CV less than 1%. So it's important because it's the denominator. It's like, how much material do you have in every assay? You basically normalize by this. But very hard to measure accurately.
Yeah. Think about going back to the founding of BigHat. Is there one piece of advice that you would give yourself in building this type of company, an AI-enabled therapeutics company?
Yes. And it's a fabulous question, because I think it really kind of captures what are all the things that I was misunderstanding how easy or difficult they would be. And when I think back, the thing that I found I wish I had done earlier is we always thought of ourselves as becoming a therapeutics company. Even toward the end of the seed, we were like, we're going to make drugs and get them into people. I wish we had leaned even more into understanding how to pick targets, tell good stories about drug development. We could have done that from day one, and that would have been helpful. Because ultimately, people care about BigHat's technical capabilities insofar as we can embody them in actual differentiated drugs that help patients. And telling the story of why your drug is valuable is mostly a story about how it's going to help people and what the standard of care is today and why your new approach is going to be valuable and all of that material. And it has very little to do with like the cool AI tech that helped you make it. And that became more and more of a critical item as BigHat matured as a company. Can you explain to me what your pipeline is, why it looks like this, how you're going to help people? And had we done that earlier, we would have just been better aligned as a company from day one for what the story was really going to need to be 5-6 years out. I think we ended up at a really good place, but it's such a mission critical activity. You've got to do it as early as possible.
Yeah. Okay. Now you've stepped down as CEO at BigHat. When was that actually? How long ago?
About a year. So I stepped down in March of 2025.
Mm-hmm. So almost exactly a year. Okay. Why? Why did you step down? What was the reason for this decision?
So I think first off, it was just a very difficult decision. I mean, it really, I was noodling over this for a long time. The underlying core tension was pretty simple. On one hand, BigHat was doing very well. It was scaling up as a company. We were adding partners. We have drugs going into people in 2026. It needed dedicated bandwidth from its CEO focused on all the things for BigHat going forward. And that was increasingly difficult because I really like this sort of early stage startup, like what are the things that we could do today with new technologies. I'm really kind of a 0 to 1 guy. And so I was accumulating this large backlog of like pretty interesting ideas. Hey, I wish we could solve this. This is a real opportunity if we could combine this technology with that to address this problem. And it was clear that this log of ideas was just growing and growing and growing. And at some point I had to choose of like, either I'm going to double down on BigHat and stay here for the next 5 years of the journey, bringing the molecules to people. And I'm going to put the backlog away and stop looking at it saying, okay, this stuff isn't going to happen anytime soon. Or else I'm going to have to lean into it and say, okay, I got to go work on some of these newer things. And frankly, that decision was made easier by two kind of key features. One, my mentor, Stan Lapidus, this was his career style. He created 5 or 6 companies over the last few years. I think most famously, Exact Biosciences now with its purchase by Abbott. He invented their Cologuard test. But, you know, when I worked with Stan, he actually got the clinical readout of the Exact test. And he was already 2 companies out from the development of that technology. So he showed me you could do this. You could pass the baton to people in the companies and they would take it forward. And then, of course, because I had Peyton as my co-founder and she was excited about becoming the CEO, I had a natural successor right in front of me that I could pass the baton to. So it was a great example of like listening to your mentors on how they do it and having somebody who was and remains an unbelievably strong executive to take the company to the next stage.
Okay, so you were really interested in company building 0 to 1, which brings us to the venture studio quite naturally. So that's what you're building now, a venture studio for therapeutic startups. Can you explain the model and what does it look like in practice? What's the difference from other approaches like Flagship, for example, and what gap are you filling?
Excellent. So the scope of the things we're going after is sort of all deep tech. So I think about this as maybe from biology to chemistry, touching material science, maybe pure software tech is sort of within. So it's kind of all the stuff that I've always loved doing. Therapeutics is in there.
Not just therapeutics. Okay,
yes.
Interesting.
Therapeutics is there, but it's not the only thing. In fact, we're gravitating a little bit toward some more tools and some other things for the first companies. But I think about this as really a deep tech incubator for a handful of people. You could think about this is the equivalent of trying to make startups in your garage. Like we want to have, you know, the HP, the Google stories of being in somebody's garage. The problem is doing that if you're a life sciences company sends you to jail because you're not allowed to pour reagents down your kitchen sink. But, you know, So you got to sort of solve the infrastructure problem for deep tech. Like you need lab equipment, you need operations, you need a place to build deep tech startups. And we wanted to lean into the AI side of the world because we have this idea at Ember AI Studios, which is the name of the studio, that we can really leverage the advances in AI tech to keep the teams really small and nimble. Because it's democratized access to expertise, we feel quite empowered to move around in scientific domains to understand how things really work. And by having small teams moving around, we're really able to focus on commercially important but scientifically overlooked problems. We're taking these small teams that are all AI accelerated or AI augmented, trying to do a couple years of work to create a seed stage / Series A stage startup focused on some deep tech problem with a clear commercial challenge and a path to company creation, all under one hood. So we think that the integration of like R&D, company formation, and problem definition with small teams is like finally enabled for deep tech companies with the AI tech.
And so
it's a lot. I'm happy to unpack it. That's overall what we're doing.
How are people financed when they come in? Is there some initial financing from Ember that you give to teams, to founder teams, and then they are expected to go out to raise at some point, or what does it look like?
Yeah, so you can think about it as Ember is a pretty small organization. You know, today it's a handful of people, but we're envisioning it growing it to kind of 20 people over time. Those are, you know, going to be a handful. Like imagine 3 5-person teams doing research or company development in specific areas, like a theme like protein production or, you know, AI enabled data interpretation. And there'll be capital in Ember through a combination of we partner with companies to co-create things. So we have a deep relationship with one biopharma today that we work with closely to identify challenges that we both think are important to solve, and we would be in a great position to solve them with these small teams. But in the long run, Ember is intended to be evergreen. It kind of takes capital positions on the startups, and that comes back into Ember to fund the operations. But we're not envisioning it being we decided not to be a venture capital firm because we didn't want to be in the business of raising funds all the time. We just wanted to keep the incentives really focused on founding, and company value creation is the driver of value in the company, in the studio. So it's a bit smaller than like a flagship or an Arch or a YC, which is really trying to go pretty broad. But that allows us to stay, I think, very focused. And we'll grow as we hope the early startups start to get traction and grow themselves. And so we won't scale up Ember until we've really got, you know, companies that are doing well under our hood.
Okay. Interesting. And which kind of people come into Ember to found? What's the DNA of the Ember founder, and how do you get to know these people? Yeah.
So that's already very helpful. It's people that I see as extremely talented who would benefit from being in an ecosystem of other experienced operators. So we tend to be very experienced individuals, you know, multiple companies already under the hood, multiple areas. Interestingly, often tend to have broad backgrounds too. You know, one of the things people who like this Ember vision of like, we're going to find challenges and see if we can tackle them with like novel tech and novel science and all of stuff, tend to be pretty broad scientists themselves. They maybe had an experimental background and they were computational for a long time. Like my co-founder was an experimentalist for many years, but his most recent stint was as a data scientist at 23andMe. So it's a broad exposure to the sciences and technology development and interest in really moving the needle on science heavy problems. And typically I've been there and done that experience, right? I've started a couple of companies. I have a very strong vision of what it would take to make a really compelling company. And we're providing kind of that umbrella to say, look, there's a couple of years we can work with a partner or get a grant or fund out of Ember's fund directly. Let's build and prove out something that's really going to work before we, jump on what is a very effective venture, treadmill. But it's not perfect in the beginning when you're trying to do kind of tech dev and transfer and all the messiness of deep tech startup creation. This we hope to give a little bit more stable environment.
Okay. Let me ask one last question before we change gears. Since we talked about the type of founder, and you said they seem to be rather, like the people that you work with are rather broad, would you say there is an underappreciated skill that people need when they move into hard sciences and come from a computational background, say?
I mean, like it may just not work for reasons that it could be completely compelling. You're like, it has to work this way, and it doesn't work. And I thought really what you learn fundamentally as being a scientifically trained person. It's like you work on problems where you can't solve them. They don't make any progress. Your best effort was not good enough. And that is super valuable to learn if you're going to be in the deep tech space, because it gives you the mindset I think you need to succeed, which is analogous to the mindset you get in tech where you're like, build products and see if people like them. It's like the truth is out there in the environment. You've got to go test it. It's not so far, but the fact that you don't control the physical world is more proximal than like you don't control what people like about your product. But it's the underlying need for rapid iteration. Build something, validate that your idea is right, show that things are working. Like that incremental approach that you learn in science, sort of a good handhold on every rung before you climb up to the next one on the ladder. This is, I think, you got to learn this if you're going to be in the deep tech space.
And
but
that's very
all
different
the founders and experienced people, they learn this, right? Because you don't want to be too far over your ski tips and realize, oh my God, this is not true, what we thought.
Yeah, definitely. It's very different from being a, say, software engineer, which some people might still remember that was a thing 2 years ago. But where you have everything under your control. But as you say, if you're a software engineer that becomes a founder, then suddenly you're out in the real world, maybe testing with customers. Or if you're a software engineer that now suddenly works with experiments, scientific experiments, then there's a million other things that can go wrong.
Yeah, and you've got to test it.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a lot of lessons learned there. Absolutely.
And that was always something that I wanted to do. And I passed on my sort of love of music to my kids, but they started to get really into playing music. And so I had this unbelievable experience about 5 years ago of my oldest daughter getting really good at the flute. And I remember watching her every step, and I'm like, she's doing it. Like, I should be able to do this. I want to play music with her. So I joined School of Rock, started learning how to drum, and now I've been playing drums for years and years now here in the Bay Area. So people actually can come and see me play, at the Blue Oak Brewery, playing pop, punk, and emo at the middle of May. So I'm like floating around in the Boston or the Bay Area music scene now. Not great.
I believe
it doesn't go super well, but that's okay. She's now seen how much I like School of Rock, and she's going and learning guitar there this summer. So the youngest one already does vocals, and she'll be on guitar. So now we've got the DePristo band almost there. We'll have guitar, drums, and singing.
That's really cool. He just turned 16 today, actually. Right after this podcast, right after this podcast, I'm going to see him after his 16th birthday party. So he's playing the guitar, and he's going crazy now. He had lessons, stopped, and then at some point he was interested in music again. And that's been super interesting to see. And now he's doing it like he's coming home from school and he's instantly jamming. It seems to give him like the best relaxation and
It's
the best
unbelievable.
kind of downtime.
It's mentally consuming. You're like, it's interesting. You know, there's a lot of evidence that like you're better at thinking and processing when you're active, right? It's like, why do you think better when you're walking? Because like somehow there's something about the process of walking that like distracts you and cleans up your mind. It's like just staying on beat is like a little bit of a brain cycle demand, and that's just kind of cleaning the system.
Yeah,
It's fascinating to play with other people and play music it's just an unbelievable experience.
I hear that it's a great kind of okay, now I'm lacking the English words. It's a great way to synchronize yourself with other people emotionally also, right?
Yes. One of the things that's really surprising and interesting about it is you're forbidden to bring music in. You can't look at sheet music.
Ah.
It's very interesting. And the reason for it is simple. Like, playing together is much less about knowing the music than it is about adjusting your play so that you're synchronized with everybody else. Because you're better off playing fewer notes as long as you're on the same beat. And so there is this skill that you have to develop, which is listening to the other people while you're playing and adjusting.
Yeah.
And it's surprisingly, it's just surprisingly amazing experience where it's like suddenly everyone is synced up. You're like, you can tell there's a moment where it's like, oh, it's working. We've got it. And you go. And it's like, you're not teaching it. It's like totally emerges out of a set of skills and like a common effort. It's like you're trying to get into kind of a collective flow state where everyone knows what they're doing. Everyone's practicing. But the difference between a little bit of gear grinding with the sand and like truly aligning is shockingly huge. It's not a little effect. Like you're all aligned, you're flying along, and you're doing a great job. And learning how to do that with other people on the fly is an amazingly exciting and frankly quite good skill to know.
Yeah, definitely. I think for me it was like that with dancing in the beginning. You just go and you try to, there's certain figures you just kind of, it's almost like the steps are painted on the floor and you're just trying to do exactly these steps, like what the teacher is telling you and whatnot. Then once you groove with the music, which you're not making, but you dance to, and with your partner, that's really when it happens. And that's where all the fun lies also.
Exactly. It's like there's a minimum technical skill.
Yeah.
Which it's kind of fun to learn because it's very technical. But then there's this, as you say, this odd moment where suddenly the next level of the actual activity comes in. Yeah. And you're no longer focused on your feet. It's like, I don't even really know where my hands are drumming. Like, I'm not even thinking about it. It's all muscle memory.
Yeah.
But it's like now suddenly you're doing this complicated thing that's intertwined with other people. Mm-hmm. It's funny. I suspect, in the long run, the AI tech will be really good for these things. People are so negative. They just miss it. They think about all the negative side effects of this. But I wouldn't be surprised if, we spend more and more of our time doing things collaboratively. And then we record the meeting and say, what do we like about the slides? What do we not like? What are we missing? Because it's not somebody's slides. It's not my slides that you're attacking. It's our slides that we're working on. Mm-hmm. A lot of the issues that you get with people being defensive and not this all goes away and you're harmonized. We are collectively working on the same thing because There's no cost to any individual there to do more or less work. They're not. And that integration, that ability to really just talk and not worry about how much work it's going to be, because it's not any work, it's just the slides and the AI tech doing it. It's surprisingly freeing from how we used to do things. It's very reminiscent of playing music together. Now we're just riffing. Like, let's really talk about what we like and don't like, and we'll figure out how to incorporate it later. That's a different thing.
Yeah, definitely. There's quite a few places where I think the joy of building comes back just because you can talk about ideas rather than, say, mountains of code.
Go ahead, make it happen. It takes 2 seconds. But then, and I think this is really what's freeing, I look at it, I'm like, you know what? I'm more of a Python guy than a JavaScript guy. It's like, fine, no problem. Bam, there it is. Python. You're like, okay, this is great. Like, it's just so... Like, I can learn how the thing works by actually just interacting with the actual implementation. Like, show me what you're really going to do. Like, how does it start? Is it a command line tool to start an MCP server? Like, what exactly is this? I don't have to read docs.
Same here.
Just look at it.
Yeah, exactly. Same here. Yeah, you learn while you're building, and that's really liberating, I have to say. Yeah.
And
Very
the
nice,
only
Mark.
thing you have to worry about is running out of tokens.
Absolutely.
Awesome, this situation we're in. And I couldn't be happier spending so much time doing the AI native tech. I mean, I feel like we're surfing on the wave now.
Absolutely, we are. Thank you, Mark, for being a guest on Machines and Molecules. It was a real pleasure having you. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to see which companies come out of Ember. Is there some company that is going to come out of stealth soon out of Ember?
We're pretty deep in a protein production company. We have this idea of easy protein production for everyone. This was a huge bottleneck at BigHat, not on the platform screening technology side. That was very well handled, but now I need enough that I can do animal studies or start to head into the clinic. Like, this becomes very difficult. So the first company we're really thinking about is in that space. I think it's hugely impactful for everyone if we can actually democratize protein production.
Yeah, very interesting. Looking forward to see it come out of stealth.
Excellent.
Thank you, Mark.
It was really a pleasure, Mark.
Great to have you, and looking forward to meeting you at some point.
Excellent. And enjoy your birthday party.
Will do. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.